How about if we listen when other people are speaking also? All right? So then under good learner, I would write, listen to the teacher and listen to others when it's their turn to talk. Something else we would agree to. So what is it? We should raise our hand before we talk. So I write that on the chart. Okay, we're agreeing we're going to raise our hand. Hey, boys and girls, I like this. We're going to raise our hands before we talk. Something else we should agree to do or not to do. We should respect each other. What does respect mean? And I would ask the kids this. I want them to say, respect means I treat people politely. I treat people as though they are as important or more important than me, considering other people's needs. What is something else we agree? Respect each other? You'll follow the directions that you get from the teacher? How about something we won't do? We won't disrupt the classroom. We won't disrupt the students. Something else. Sorry. We won't talk back. Okay? Maybe you have to say, we won't hit each other. We will keep our hands to ourselves. You let the students tell you all the good things, and they will do, and the things they won't do. Here's what I've discovered. When kids do this, they are much harder on themselves than I would be on them as a teacher normally. They're going to make up stricter rules. And then under good teacher, I write, if you do these things, I will prepare. I will make Sunday school exciting. And I list the things that I do, and I might say, and if we keep these rules, then at the end of the quarter or whatever, we will have a class party. Sure. So I list these things on the poster board. Okay? So it might look like this. We'll raise our hands. We won't interrupt. We'll listen to others. We don't bring toys to Sunday school. We are respectful, etc. That's on the side of the poster board, the chart that says good learners, good teacher. I will pray. I will prepare. I will make class enjoyable. So we have this chart. So what do I do with this poster board and this chart now? I have all of my students sign it. And if they're preschoolers, I bring in some tempera paint and I stick their hands in the tempera paint and I put their handprint on the chart and I write the name of the preschooler on the handprint. I make them sign this saying that I agreed to this. You know what else I do? Let's see what this says. Oops. I keep the chart visible all the time. It's behind me as a teacher all the time. And then I make a copy of it and I send it to their parents. And I make the parents sign it and bring it back to me. Because I don't want any parent to be able to say, that's unfair. You agreed to it, honey. You signed that sucker. Right? That also means that when I have a student in my classroom, for instance, that starts talking out of turn, I can say, excuse me, could you tell me what you agreed to do? I agreed to raise my hand. Good, you can still read. I appreciate that. So what are you going to do before you speak? I'm gonna. One time I went to a church. They asked me if I would teach children's church. It's like 1st through 6th grade together. It was like 75 kids I'd never met. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. They literally, in this church, because they had a gymnasium, they had Sunday school, and then they had children's church during the worship time. Between Sunday school and children's church, these kids were so bad, they would take them into the gymnasium, and they would run them around the room until they exhausted them. That's how bad it was. I came there on that Sunday morning, and the first thing I did was I wore a Bible Times costume because that got their attention. And I said, we're going to do a review of what you've been studying. So I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions, boys and girls, but there's one really important thing you have to do before you can answer a question. Would anyone like to guess what it is? And they all said, raise our hand. Does everybody agree that when I ask a question, you will not answer unless you raise your hand and I call on you? And I made them all agree. I started asking questions, and of course, you know what happened. Immediately, several students started shouting out the answer. And I said, wait a minute, what did we just agree to? We'll raise our hand before we speak. Within about 5 minutes, every time someone would try to answer the question without raising their hand, somebody would turn around and say, don't you get it? He's not going to accept your answer or call on you unless you raise your hand. So what you get is you get good peer pressure going in that classroom. If it's a toy that they're not supposed to bring, and you see it, you'll say, Jonathan, what did you agree to a few weeks ago about bringing toys to Sunday school? We're not supposed to bring them. Great. Let me have it, and you can have it back when we're finished this morning. And I take it. Now, when you do this, what will happen is when you ask a question or someone else is talking, you will see the eyes of the students looking over your shoulder and reading the chart again, reminding themselves. And when you start doing this, and when students begin to raise their hand, before you call on them, you might say something like, Jake, you raised your hand, and that's a great example to everyone. I appreciate it, man. That's good. That helps you become good learners, and it really helps me as a teacher. Thank you so much for doing that. So we reinforce that. Okay, so they get the chart. It's kept in sight. If I have a visitor that comes into my classroom, I will say to someone in the classroom, I'll say, before we begin, since we have a couple visitors today, would someone read what we've agreed to do to be good learners? And I will have them read it to the whole class. And it stays up front all the time. Does this make sense to you? It works. It works. It works in my home. It works in my classroom. It works with students. They will do this. Now, it may take about 4 weeks to train them so that they see that you're really serious. You're going to do this. Okay? What happens when the agreements are broken? The first thing you do, the first time the agreement is broken, is you say, excuse me, could you remind me what you agreed to? See, there's your name signed right there. Remember signing that? Because that way they can't say, you never told me. Isn't that what our kids do all the time? Even you look them right in the eyes and you tell them, this is what you have to do. This is what's going to happen if you do. This is what's going to happen if you don't. And the next day, you never said that, right? That's the nature of kids. Now, remember, we're developing a new culture, a kingdom-centered classroom culture. Kingdom-centered classroom culture means that everyone has to participate and everyone has to obey. Why? Because that's the way you get a smooth running classroom, right? Everyone does it. So you have expectations. Let me give you some ideas of some expectations. For instance, when I teach preschoolers, when the class is over, I do not clean up the room. I do not clean up the tables. I do not put the chairs back. Who does it? The kids do it. So I will have a signal. Maybe I flip the lights on and off 3 times, and that says to a group of preschoolers, it's time to stop. It's time to clean up. And when one child refuses to do it, okay, you simply go over, you look them right in the eyes, and you say, do you remember what you agreed to? It's time to clean up, and you are a part of my classroom, and you're going to obey me now. We have every right to expect them to obey us immediately. We should not have to beg them or warn them or count. I do not do that. And I simply say, if you refuse to do it, next week you do not touch this toy. Next week you do not sit at this table. You sit next to me or whatever. And pretty soon they get the idea. This guy is serious. He means it. But you communicate those expectations over and over and over, and you remind them, and you use these words. We are creating a King Jesus culture in our classroom. Now, that means that sometimes, okay, talked about that. When you do the chart for preschoolers, and for instance, if you say we raise our hand before we talk, you just draw a picture of a child with a hand raised. If one of your rules is we don't talk when someone else is talking, you draw a picture of a person with their mouth open, and you draw a red circle with a red line through it. They know what that means. So preschoolers, you do that. One of the things I do with preschoolers also is I take a paint stirring stick, like you get at Lowe's or Home Depot, and I paint it multicolors, and it's called the talking stick. And you cannot speak in the classroom unless you are holding the talking stick. If I give it to you, you may talk, and when you're finished, you cannot give it to a friend. You have to give it back to the teacher. Okay? All right. So you communicate your expectations. You let them help you make the expectations. You get their agreement. You review frequently. You reward them for becoming good listeners, and you keep your side of the agreement. We've already talked about preparation, so we won't spend a lot of time. But if you want a good, smooth-running classroom, you have to be prepared. What does that mean? That means from the moment your students walk in your room, there's something happening. There's no time for them to start messing around and get things out they're not supposed to get out, or to start, doing things they're not supposed to be doing. I'm in my classroom when I teach children a minimum of 15 to 30 minutes early. I have things prepared so that the moment the first person walks in the door, I direct them to a place to do something. And that gives them no time to get crazy on me. So be over-prepared. We've talked about that. We talked about relationships. And it simply comes down to this. You can either be the leader in the classroom as the adult and the teacher, or you're going to be following the kids. You can lead or you can follow. We're going to talk about this a little more extensively tomorrow with the parents. Because the same thing is true in your home and my home, isn't it? You can lead or you're going to be following. Trust me. Would you rather be the leader or the follower? If you're the teacher, you better want to be the leader. Okay? Any questions so far? Yes, ma'am. Awards. I'm a big believer in reward system, as long as it's coupled with the building of the relationship. It's not a substitute for relationships. I'm a big believer in rewards. I get a paycheck. And what I do, for instance, we can do that now. We have a website called discipleland.com/downloads. You can go to that website and you can print out Disciple Land dollars. I print them off. There's 1s, 5s, and 10s. Okay? And I award my students Disciple Land dollars for keeping the rules. Now, I am not a believer in throwing candy at them for keeping the rules. They save their Disciple Land dollars, and at my church, they go to a place called the Reap Store, where you reap what you've sown with your actions. And they take their Disciple Land dollars and they trade them in. Kids will do incredible things for a piece of junk from China. Won't they? It's fun. They like doing that. For older kids, as they collect the Disciple Land dollars for bringing their Bible, for doing their homework, For going online to the website we have, and for a couple of other things, they get dollars. If you get 30 Disciple N dollars, you get to come to a second party during that quarter. I take you there, and I cover the cost. If you don't get 30 Disciple N dollars, but you get 15 or more, you still get to come to the party, but you pay your own way. If you don't get 15 Disciple N dollars, you're not coming. You're not coming. That's a part of my classroom management. What do you think the mommies think about me when I say, your daughter's not coming to the party? She didn't earn the dollars. What do you think the moms say? You're mean. That's unfair. You know what they say to me? Good. She didn't do the work. She doesn't deserve to go. I had a mom, oh man, she would just, because I was doing this in the classroom. At the end of the quarter, I called and I said, Kristen, Trinity's not coming to the party. She said to me, I was really mad at you for doing this. She said, but if you had let her come to the party, I would have lost all respect for you because she didn't earn it. And after that, she became one of my best supporters. Kids will walk in the classroom and they'll say, I lost my folder and I had all of my Disciple N dollars and I had $27 in it. What are they saying? They're begging me to what? Replace the dollars. You know what I say? So sad. Too bad. I ain't your dad. I bet you find your folder and your dollars. And they have found them every single time. They've never lost them one time. They want the easy way out. And if we give them the easy way out, then they're not going to be responsible. Okay? So find ways. I'm a believer in a reward system. Pretty soon they will start doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because they're getting a reward. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. If they break the rule in the classroom, what do I do? Okay, if they break the rules in the classroom, first thing I do is I make them read what the rule is. And I say to them, this is your warning. Kids in my classroom get one warning. I drive a school van for a Christian school at 6 o'clock in the morning. They get one warning. If you take off your seatbelt, this is your warning. If you take it off ever again, you do not get to ride the bus for 1 week. Your mother or father will have to bring you to school, and they're going to be ticked. Sure. I believe in one warning. Now, I've had kids that no matter what I did, they're brats. They're just brats. So if they break the rule the second time, they go with me to their parent, and they tell the parent why we've come to them. I did this. I have gone so far as had to say to a parent, if you want your child in my classroom, you must come in the classroom and sit beside them and control them until they learn to control themselves. I have gone so far, unfortunately, then I go to their home if it doesn't work. I've had to go to homes and I've had to say to parents, your child cannot come into my classroom until they learn to behave. I cannot sacrifice the learning of 20 other students for one who does not want to obey. So your choice is you can stay in the classroom with them or they can go in church with you. You decide, but they cannot come into my classroom until they learn to behave. I just tell them, I will not spend an hour and 15 minutes telling your son or your daughter, stop, don't do this, don't do that, get over here, leave him alone, put that down. I won't do that. Because that means I'm ignoring every other child in the classroom. Any other questions? I'm a tough guy, aren't I? I learned a long time ago, you have to be. Okay, Let's see if there's anything else we absolutely need. Oh, you know what? That's where I stopped on this because I knew we only had a few minutes. Does this make sense to you? If you'll make the chart, and you'll have them make the rules with you, and you'll remind them frequently, and you will acknowledge when they're keeping the rules and tell them how much you appreciate it, you will develop a new culture in your classroom. Okay? So we're going to take another break. Yes, ma'am.
So usually that works if you're the only teacher that comes week after week after week.
Yes.
But usually here we switch.
Yes.
Teacher comes every 2 weeks we switch, so hopefully the other teacher will follow exactly the same.
Do you switch because so that the other person can be in the worship service?
Yeah, so they get a chance, like every teacher teaches.
2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. All right, here's what you have to do. You have to be consistent that both teachers are doing the same thing. If you are my students and I've had 2 weeks with you and I'm going to be gone the next 2 weeks, I would come into that classroom on the weeks that I don't teach. I would look at every student. I would say hello to every student. I would say, I'm so glad you're here today. I'm going to be in big church today. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Keep that relationship going. So I go in. Every time I'm not there, I still go in the classroom and say hi to the kids and say, you know, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so is going to be your teacher today. You know that already. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay? All right. Anything else? Seems like we just started. The break we're going to take now is how long? So, are they going to be eating anything else right now?
We don't eat. If you're okay, we can continue the break, but according to the plan, there's break at 6:30, but we can go on. We can move on.
Move on? Or follow the rules. All right, let's move on. BK, 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 come change. Let's jump into, you know what, this is going to work out perfect now. Let's jump into learning styles, and then we will take a little break, and then we'll do understanding preschoolers. If you don't teach preschoolers, and you need to go, I understand that, but if you don't teach preschoolers and you have the time, you want to hang out with us, it'll be fun. All right, grab your handout that looks like this one. It says learning styles at the top. It's 2 pages. Okay, I think it should have been 3 pages. Oh, this person got cheated. It's only 2. Everybody got 3 pages? Okay. Actually, what we were supposed to do tonight is Aruk told me that whoever ended up with a 2-page handout got a $100 bill. But they left, so too bad. I'll just keep it right here. Okay. We're going to be talking about learning styles. This is very different than anything you've probably ever looked at. Very different than anything we've done prior tonight, as far as tonight is concerned. Some of you may have gone to workshops where you talked about visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, and so on. Right brain learners, left brain learners. Most of my kids are no brain learners. We're not talking about any of that. We're going to talk about the format system. And so basically what we're going to do is I will identify 4 learning styles. They've been given a name. The names don't mean much, but they had to give them a name so that we could remember them. Okay? And they're given a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you don't see any yourself, for instance, on any of these categories, that means you are a 0. Sorry. No. teasing. All right, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So here we're going to go. If you want to teach them, reach them, and teach them the way God made them, then you're ready for learning styles. Everyone in this room has a dominant learning style. What the dickens does that mean? It means that you have a dominant part of your personality that likes to do things a certain way in life. And some of you wives thinking if your husband would like to say, amen, right? It's the way you prefer to do things. When we talk about learning styles, it's the way you prefer to learn. It's the kind of teaching methodologies that wake you up. Okay? Now, learning styles must start, as far as we can tell, at conception. Because whether you're a believer or not, you've got a learning style. Only believers get spiritual gifts. There is a correlation, though, between some spiritual gifts and learning styles. We don't have time to go into that, but everybody has a learning style. Everybody on the face of the earth has a dominant learning style. And that dominant learning style stays with me my entire life. Now, you're going to be asking yourself, well, can I be more than one learning style? You will take skills from another learning style and incorporate them into your personality because it works. And you'll see someone else do something, you say, that's pretty good, I've never done that before, and so you will use that. Does that change your learning style? No. All right, learning styles are influenced by parents, experiences, and expectations. You may be in a job where they have expectations for you that are totally contrary to your personality. You just go, oh. But you do it, right? Because you got to do it to keep your job. So expectations influence our personality or learning style. So take this page that you see there, and if you look with me at the top, it says concrete and then people. What does that mean? It means that the two learning styles at the top, the innovative learners and the dynamic learners, the number 1 and the number 4, those two learning styles are personality types by their very nature are people. What does it mean if I say, BK is a people person? What does that mean about BK? Come on, sociable? Not necessarily. It means he likes people. He likes being around people, right? You can be a people person, you can be an introvert, or you can be an extrovert. You don't necessarily have to be outgoing. My Jonathan is an introverted, innovative people person. My wife is an extroverted, innovative people person. If the two of them walked in this room and I called their names, I said, everybody, look, there's Jonathan and my wife. His face would go red like this. Shh. And she would just start smiling and come over and introduce herself to you and tell you how crazy you are for being here tonight and listening to this guy and all that stuff. She's an extroverted people person. Okay? Concrete thinkers mean that when you teach them, they love it when you have pictures, PowerPoint, things they can manipulate and touch. Okay? Innovative learners, real quickly, go around the horn and come back. Innovative learners are characterized by several words. Life is lived. That means they get up today. These are the people that get up today. They live today. And at the end of the day, they say, this was a really good day. Too bad the rest of you had to make it so complicated. You could have enjoyed it. All right? And they learn by asking simple question. You say something to them and they say, why? Well, why are we doing it that way? Well, why aren't we doing it the way we did it yesterday? They'll say things like, oh, why did you just say that? Why aren't you talking to me the way you were a few minutes ago, so nice and sweet? That's how they learn. I met a young girl. She was like 22 years old. She heard this, and in the back of the room, she just started yelling and stuff. She said, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I used to get in trouble all the time with my parents because they would tell me I couldn't go someplace, and I would say, and they thought I was being rude and disrespectful. But inside my brain and my heart, I needed to know the reason why. They're not being rude or disrespectful. They need to know why. So they will say, okay, now why are we doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it? See the picture? Next thing is, they're characterized by love and heart. They are the ultimate unconditional lovers. They just love you because you're still sitting upright and haven't dropped over dead in the pew. They think with their heart, so they wear their emotions on their sleeve for everybody to see them. They're typically very emotional people, and they know it. Now look on the right-hand side of the page there, and it says reflective. Reflective is a characteristic that the innovative and the one below them, the analytic, share. And reflective means that in a classroom setting, when you ask the innovative and the analytic a question, they need you to give them time to process before you demand an answer. Now, for the innovative, they process based on how they feel. The analytic is going to process based on how they think. Sure. So I said to my Jonathan, who's innovative, one day, I said, hey, would you like to run down to Atlanta to Stone Mountain? It's this big, largest piece of granite, I guess, in the United States. Would you like to run down to Stone Mountain and let's go to the park tomorrow? We could spend the night tonight, go to the park tomorrow, and we could bring your sister Summer back because she had some friends that were taking her down there. He didn't respond. He just looked at me. I thought that's weird. And I went downstairs. I said, hey, do you want to go to Stone Mountain or not? He said, I don't like it when you're planning something big like that, and you do it all of a sudden and don't give me time to decide. He said, so I'd prefer not to go. Yeah. They need time to process. The analytic, they're characterized by the words thinkers, watchers. They watch, they observe, they're thinking all the time, they're processing with their brains, and they learn by saying, what was that number, what was that formula, what was that app, what was that date? Just the facts, just the facts, just the facts. The analytic says, I don't think with my heart. I use my... And they love to gather information that they can turn into wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to properly use knowledge. Okay? Now, if you look at the bottom of that page on your handout there, it says that the analytics and the common sensors are non-people. What does that mean? It means they would rather work rather than in a group. And they are also abstract thinkers. So you ask them a question, and the computer upstairs turns on, and they start processing everything that's in their head, and then they answer. Now, reflective means back off, give me time, let me process, let me think, let me see how I feel about it. Okay? But you look at the common sense, and they have a different word. They have the word active. Now, if the innovative and the analytic, reflective means they think or process before they act, what does the active learner do? They act before they think. So they get into a lot of trouble. Yes, they get into a lot of trouble. Because, and you're saying to them, do you ever, before you open your... And for them, they'll say, I think I did once. And the common sense would also say, and so what's it to you? Because that's their personality. The common senser likes to do things step by step. They learn by asking you, okay, now tell me how this works. Now the problem is, they will either say, how does it work? Or they will act like they already know everything. Sure. They should wear a shirt that says, I may not always be right, but I'm never Wrong. They should have another shirt. As long as everything is going my way, I'm totally flexible. They should have another shirt. Just to save time, let's just assume that I do know everything. That's your common sensor. Okay? They learn by saying, how does it work? Characterized by the words justice and hands. And justice means that they in life have a long list of that everyone except them. Aha, gotcha. That came out of your mouth real quickly. They're characterized by the word hands, meaning they like to do things where they can get their hands into it. You know? They like to do things where they can work with their hands. They're active learners, so they get in a lot of trouble because they speak before they act. Now we jump up to the dynamics for a second. And the dynamics, called the number 4s, they're characterized by the words experiment. What does that mean? It means they like to try a lot of different things. And they learn by asking themselves, okay, what could this become if we did it this way? Wow, just think how much better this could be if all 4 of these people were involved rather than just one. They're always looking to the future. Well, what could it become if? That's the way their brain thinks. And that's why they're characterized by the words courage and spirit. They have a lot of courage. They'll jump into something even though, you know, they know they're going to have to learn as they go, but they're the people that the can-do attitude. We can do this, and it'll be great. And spirit simply means that when they get into it, it's all of me. Sure. All right, now, let's look quickly at each one. Innovatives, typically sociable, friendly, sensitive, in tune with their feelings. Means they like to be around people. They will be friendly. They may not be an introvert. They may not be an extrovert. Okay? They could be one or the other. Characterized by love and heart. Now, if you are innovative and you're in a classroom or you're a parent or you're in a group at school, whatever, if you are innovative and you're the leader, you're going to be sympathetic to everybody's feelings. Oh, I understand why you feel that way. Yeah, I understand why you feel that way too, even though it's completely different than the way he feels. Oh, and I understand how you feel too. Sure. That's the way God made them. Typically friendly people. The innovatives say, I learn best by listening and sharing. What do they mean? They know they're good listeners. They like to listen, but then they want you to stop and then let them speak to you. Okay? If you just tell them, and don't give them an opportunity to speak, they get very frustrated. Okay? Start with the big picture and say, this is what we're going to do today. This is where we're going and what we're going to be looking at. And then they go, okay, no surprises. I'm comfortable now. As a teacher, you'll be supportive and nurturing and sympathetic to your students. So if you have an innovative child that walks into your classroom and you are not innovative as a teacher, and you go like this, hi, and you go back to what you were doing, what did you just say to that innovative student? I'm not important. Now, if you're an innovative teacher and a student walks through the door, here's what you're going to do almost all the time. Hi, how are you? Come over here. Wow, look at those shoes. Those are like totally cool. Let me see them up close. Come here and give me a... yes. That's what the innovative teacher would do. And some of your students, when you do that, are going to go, get back, no touch, no touch. Right? Because they're not people. Now, if I ignore the innovative student, they're going to say, this is going to be a crummy day at church. But if I turn to the innovative and I give them my attention, they're going to say, this is going to be a great day at church. How many of you are people and you like hugging? So you walk into church and somebody sees you and you need a hug. And they go like this. Hi, I've got stuff to do. You feel bad, don't you? Sure, of course. Now let's look at what they like and don't like when it comes to teaching methods, things you would do in the classroom with them. They like to break up into small groups and chat and talk. They like to do role plays. You know what role plays and mimes are? They like to do role plays. You'll notice that they like to do all the things that allow them to work with other and be expressive. So they like team games. They like art, brainstorming. They like object lessons and visual aids. They like all these things that involve other people or stimulate emotions. Look at the things they don't like. They don't like timed tests. Why don't they like a timed test? Because it creates stress, anxiety. Absolutely. They don't like computer education. That doesn't mean they don't like computers. They typically do not like online education because it's too impersonal. Now, they might like computers because a computer would allow them to be really creative. Sure. So they might like the computer. My Jonathan is innovative. I don't think we'll ever be able to get him to do another online course. He wants to be in a classroom. Even if he goes to the classroom and he meets the teacher and the teacher says, get out your computers and do this online, he's okay with that. But not to have that human contact really frustrates him. Okay? They don't like computer education, and they don't like the common sense learner. Notice that they are diametrically opposite of one another. They do not like them as the teacher. Why? Because one is the ultimate people person and one is the ultimate non-people person. One wants to go with the flow and be flexible, and the other one has a lot of rules. Okay? Innovatives say, I will work best when, bring me in the room and tell me why we're doing, there's that why thing, why we're doing what we're doing. Today, boys and girls, today, men and women, when I start my Sunday school class teaching parents right now, I start my class with telling them, I give them a quick review of where we've been. I tell them where we're going for the day, and then I will jump into the lesson. And the innovators in the classroom then are very relaxed. They have this sense inside that I know where we're going. Don't expect too much too soon. And the interesting thing about innovatives, it says they like to think out loud. That means they like to talk to who? Say it. Their self. For years, I thought my wife had somebody living in her closet. Every morning she's talking to somebody about what she's going to wear. And one morning I said, who are you talking to? She said, I'm talking to myself. Leave me alone. I said, I'm going to leave both of you alone. Now, an interesting thing about this, very often innovatives, as they are learning, they need to read out loud what they are learning to hear it in their ear in their own voice. That's how they comprehend. And it can drive you crazy if you're trying to work next to them. They talk to themselves. And they like to be involved with people. Analytics. Analytics are reflective. They like to think before they act, but they are non-people people, so they would rather work alone than in a group. They love difficult problems. They like planning for the long range. If you are analytic and you are the leader or the teacher, you're going to come prepared with tons of information. And you're going to want to get through all that information. So you don't want your class raising their hands and asking questions. because you want to get through all the information. I was kidding a guy that's analytic one time about being analytic, and I said, yeah, you got to get through your 15 pages of notes, and you got to make sure that they hear every word you've written down there. His name was Steve. He went like this, and he slammed his fist down on the table in the workshop. He said, you don't get it. I've got 45 minutes, and these were his words. He said, you got to ram it in and cram it in. You know their heads are hollow. He said, you got to ram it in and cram it in because there's a lot more to follow on my notes. He said that. Excuse me, Steve. Analytics come well prepared. And they want you prepared. All right? Analytics love gathering facts. They love it when you do timelines. Right now I'm teaching Old Testament, and we've gone from Genesis, and right now we're at 603 BC. And the analytics in my class love it when I do a PowerPoint with all of the dates. And, you know, who was the judge, who was the king, etc., and what was going on. The analytics love that. And they're taking notes all the time. Because that's the way God made them. All right? If you're analytic, you walk in the classroom, and you're one of these students that loves programmed instruction. You're going to like computer education. You like lectures. Why? Because you're getting a lot of information. You like stories, which may seem strange, almost like a people thing. You like drills and competition because analytics are very competitive people. They love getting straight A's. Sure. They're very competitive. They like demonstrations and object lessons. Those two things, a demonstration or an object lesson with an object, almost seems like a people thing, but it's not. For the analytic, it is either disproving or proving what you've said. Okay? Analytics say, look, role plays, I don't want to have to stand up and show my emotions. Open discussion, they'll look at you and say, why are you doing this? I'm not the least bit interested in her opinion, and you've got the answer right there on your pad. Just give it to me. They don't like small groups. Breaking up into small groups, you say, okay, read these verses, and then you all talk about it. And the analytic goes, gag me with a spoon. Please, just give us the answer. The analytic says, I don't like teachers who don't stay on task. And the analytic looks at my handout for this workshop and says, this is driving me nuts because I cannot follow you step by step. The analytic says, I work best when you just tell me what is expected. They go to a job and they say, give me the book of standard operating procedures. I'll memorize it and I'll give you exactly what you want. The analytics don't want you wasting their time. So for an analytic child that comes into my classroom, if my kids come in my classroom and the first thing they see are coloring pages that have nothing to do with the lesson, the analytic thinks, why are we doing this? It has nothing to do with the lesson. In other words, don't waste my time. Don't give me a bunch of fluff. Teach me. That's what they say. Let me work step by step. Let me think and then act. Now, what's interesting is the analytic wants recognition for their accomplishments. What they don't want is they don't want you to put their name in the church paper or bulletin or on the internet and have everybody in church stand up and applaud for them. They want you to come quietly and say, wow, your contribution today was great. That shows me you have really been thinking about this. That's all they want. The analytic, okay, let's go back here. Analytics, if you have them in your classroom, okay, very often they will sit quietly for weeks at a time. But when they finally have something to say, they will respectfully raise their hand and they will speak. But let me tell you the one thing that the analytic never, ever, ever wants you to do. They never, ever want you to say, Brooke, you've been awfully quiet for several weeks. What do you think about this? Putting them on the spot and embarrassing them. And the analytic under their breath is saying, I'll tell you what I think. I think you're a jerk. Because I didn't raise my hand. And if I have something to say, I'll raise my hand. Do you understand that? That's the way the analytic thinks. The analytic in school does not want the teacher calling on them unless they raise their hand. Because they don't want to be asked to give an answer until they have gathered enough to give the right answer. Okay? Let's jump to the common sensors. Non-people people act before they think, get into lots of trouble. They are very realistic. They don't like a lot of fluff in the classroom. They're not crazy about playing games in the classroom. They are very practical. They think in logical sequences, and life has logical consequences. Their motto is, sorry, bud, you did the crime, you're doing the time. You're going to jail, period. Okay? They're very goal-oriented, and they will work their fingers to the bone to provide the very best for their families. They like achieving goals. But the problem is, for the common sensor, most of the time, once they see that they can do this job, that it's easy, they don't want to finish it. They want to go on to the next challenge, endeavor, etc. Yes, the next challenge. They love challenges. So if I've got kids in my classroom that are common sensors and they're not memorizing Scripture, and you ask them, why aren't you memorizing the Scripture? They'll say, we got 15 Bibles at home. If I want to read it, I'll pick up a Bible and read it. Now, how do you get the common sensor to memorize Scripture? You say, yeah, I know why you're not memorizing Scripture. You can't do it. And the common sensor will come in the next week with last week's Scripture, this week's Scripture, and next week's Scripture to prove to you. I've got a common sensor, Gabriel. He's tough. And sometimes I'll say to him, it's going to rain in probably 45 minutes. I bet anything you can't get the lawn mowed before then. To prove me wrong. Sure. They like to be challenged. Okay? Common sensors learn by saying, okay, is what you're teaching me today valid? Can it be used when I walk out of this classroom? And if you're giving them information that they're saying to you, what? Why do I need to learn this? I will never use it. That's the way they look at life. And so for the common sensor, it's very important during every lesson to give them something practical and useful, and you challenge them to implement it today. By the way, common sensors, even though they're non-pupil people, they are desperately in need of mentors. They desperately need one-on-one mentoring. There's something about common sensors that very often they have an inferiority complex that they hide. And they want the world to think that they've got it all together. But inside, there's something missing. And that something very often is fulfilled by a mentor who shows them special attention. Okay? All right, if you're the teacher, you're a common sensor, you're going to be challenging your students constantly. So look at the things they like. Common sensor says, I love it when there are problems to solve, and if there isn't a problem to solve in the classroom, I will create one. If there's no problem to solve, I'll make one. If I'm a preschooler and there's no trouble going on, and there's no problem to solve, I'll take off my shoe and slam it into the head of the girl next to me. Now there's a problem to solve. Let's get this taken care of, teach. Sure. They are provokers. They love They love to provoke their brothers and sisters. It's a game for them. They just love doing it. Okay? They don't like reading because they don't see the purpose. They don't like writing because they don't see the purpose. They don't like group work. They would rather work alone. They don't like innovative learners as their teachers because the common senser is the ultimate non-people person. And every time I walk in the classroom, this stinking innovative teacher wants to give me a big... And the common senser says, don't do that. Common sensors need to learn from innovatives. They need to learn how to give and receive affection. Okay? They work best when solve a problem. They don't like to give a strict accounting of their time. They don't like you saying, so what were you doing today? Well, how come you didn't get this done? Their mode of operating is, when I want you to know my business, I will tell you. Until then, it's none of your business what I'm doing. That's the way they live life. Okay, the dynamic. The dynamic is a people person. They're curious, insightful, imaginative, creative. They like to do a lot of different things. If you're the teacher and you're dynamic, you're going to naturally stimulate, facilitate activity in your classroom. And they're constantly saying, okay, if all four of these people get involved and do it, what could it really become? It could be so much better. Okay, if you're the teacher, again, you'll be stimulating people. You will come alongside them and be curious with them and say, hey, have you ever thought? Now, my Summer, who's now 14, she is dynamic. People person. She'll see somebody doing something, coloring or something, and they're doing a terrible job. And she'll come up and put her arm around them. I love the color choices you've made for your picture. And she would never say, it's a crummy picture. She, at church, she might be sitting about where you are, and all of a sudden she'll just push me aside, and she'll jump up, and she'll run right down to the front of the church, and she'll grab somebody and hug them and smile at them. And you know what? It's usually the people that nobody else in church really wants to go hug. Her best friend, how do I say this politely? Do you know what the word homely means? Like she's just a plain Jane. There's nothing really, striking about her. Her best friend is as plain as they come. And she absolutely loves this little girl. They live 500 miles now from each other. And when they see each other, it's like best friends that have known each other all their lives. That's a dynamic. That's the way they function. All right, they like all the things that let them get involved with other people and let other people be creative. Look at the things they don't like. They don't like seating charts because they can't get their nose in everybody's business. They don't like doing it the same way over and over. Okay, they don't like being rushed. And they say, you know what? Let me try it my way today in class. Give me a chance to let me do it my way. Follow my curiosity. Let me be creative. Let me work with people. And they love being praised verbally. They want their name in the bulletin and the whole church standing up and applauding because it's not for them. It's for what we did as a class. That's how they function. All right, go back to this and we're going to be done with learning styles. I have never done this so fast in my life. Boy, what happened to my thing there? Okay, here's what I want you to do. You're going to write 4 names for me. In quadrant number 4, top left, Matthew. In quadrant number 3, just below that, Mark. In quadrant number 2, bottom right, Luke. And in quadrant number 1, top right, John. Watch this. God takes people by who they are and the way that they came out of the womb, and he uses them to write, to teach, to preach, based on their personality and the way he made them. Because you look at Matthew, the book of Matthew, what can this become? The book of Matthew contains more Old Testament prophecies and their fulfillment than any other book in the New Testament. Mark, the common censor, wrote the shortest gospel. He recorded the action miracles. He got kicked out of the group in, I think, Antioch, and took his ball and came home. You're not playing the game the way I want to play it. And he left. He caused the split up between Paul and Barnabas. There's no record in the scriptures that he ever apologized. Because common censors don't do that. Dr. Luke is analytic. What did Dr. Luke say? Remember? Facts, man, facts. Dr. Luke says, I have taken many, many notes, and I'm now writing this to give you an accurate account of the events. And what word just leaps out of all of Apostle John's writings? Love. He says things like, it does my heart good to know that my dear children are walking in the way. He is the only writer that recorded, for God so that he gave. By the way, who said that? Anybody know? Who did he record saying that? No one's ever answered that question. Jesus said that. The Apostle John was known as the apostle whom Jesus loved. You got the picture? What's it about? It's not about you figuring out what a person's learning style is and saying, na, 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 I know who you are. Not at all. It's about me saying, as I prepare, I will bend and stretch myself and use different teaching methodologies in my classroom in order that I can reach all four learning styles out of respect for the way God made them. Any questions? We're flying. No, you want all four learning styles together at every opportunity. And here's why. One's going to contribute something that another doesn't contribute. The other thing is, it's going to force me as a teacher to do things in different ways rather than getting stuck in my rut. Because as a teacher, I will normally choose teaching methodologies that are me, without regard for my students. Okay? Your learning style doesn't change, but as you get older, you will bring things from another learning style into your personality, into your teaching, into your life that work. So, real quickly, in 1 minute, you get to guess. If you already know, don't say. What is my learning style? So you say, is this guy a people person, a non-people person? Is he reflective? Is he active? What is he? And then you get to guess, what do you think my learning style is? And just shout it out, because you're not going to... Which one? Number one? Number one, innovative. Somebody else want to guess? Dynamic? Analytic? Drum roll. Ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at the ultimate non-people common censor. I have every one of those t-shirts I told you about. My wife has given me every one of those. I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong. Let's just assume that I do know everything. I have every one of them. Every one of them. You say, this is weird. Here's what I discovered. When God has a job that he wants you to do, he will mold you, he will shape you, and he will give you skills to do the job. But here's the deal. If you're not willing to let him mold you and shape you, he will break you. Listen, let him mold you and shape you, because it is no fun being broken. It is no fun being broken. And God had to teach me the hard way. Unconditional love, respecting people, and keeping my mouth shut. He had to teach me that the hard way. You know how he did it? He gave me an innovative wife. And I would come home from conferences and I would tell her that, oh boy, somebody was way down the hall and I was setting up my booth and they saw me and they started coming and running. And they were going to give me a great big hug. And I'd say to my friend in the booth with me at the exhibits, I think I have to use the restroom. And I would disappear. And my wife said to me one day, she said, you know what your problem is? You're an egomaniac. You think the hugs are for you, and they're not. They're for them. And she said to me, I got some news for you. You need to get over yourself because you ain't that great. So God will either mold you or he'll break you. He'll break you, one or the other. All right, we got to take a break and come back for understanding preschoolers. How long a break do we want to take? 10 minutes. You got to be back in 10 minutes because I'm going to start understanding preschoolers exactly in 10 minutes because it is 10:15 at my house. BK, can you switch over for me?